Hi, everybody. How is everybody doing today? Welcome to Blessed to Crochet and, of course, the Lifeboat. Hopefully, everybody can see me well and hear me well, and we can get going. I kind of wanted to do this topic. I thought it was a really important topic for Mental Health Month. It's a topic that I think we all kind of struggle with, being able to forgive. So, Sandy Wendy, welcome. Welcome, Custom Crochet. I think it's something that we all kind of struggle with is forgiveness. And let me preface this with there is no timeline on forgiveness. Hi, Badger Life. Tommy is not gone. These are the ripples that are happening right now. And Captain Calhoun, which is his son, is doing the morning and evening show. And Tommy will be on tonight at I think 7:30 Central Time, if I'm not mistaken. But he will be on tonight. But this is just a ripple at this point today. We have several ripples. Hi, Janet G. We have myself. We have Nina Meeting. We have Christy tomorrow. So these are just added benefits to the Lifeboat. But let me just preface this with saying this. You are, if you're sitting there going, well, forgiveness is not in anybody else's timeline but yours. You are responsible for your timeline and how, when, and if you choose to forgive. But I do a lot of my content, I did print some stuff out, but I don't do a lot of my content on my channel from necessarily doing this. I do it from my own personal life experience because I think that that can become valuable and an asset to be able to see, well, how did that person do what seems to be so difficult for me? How did that all happen? And the reason why I titled this and the way I did was freedom of forgiveness. It can become very, very freeing when you choose to have the power to be able to forgive. And that is not a gift to the person you're forgiving. The gift then becomes a gift to yourself. And so I wanted to make sure that people don't realize that, okay, it's mandatory that you forgive in your life. If you've chosen for whatever reason not to forgive somebody, then that totally is your choice. If it takes you 10 years to get to the place that you forgive somebody, there is no timeline on how long that takes. So the way I'm going to go at this is examples in my life where forgiveness has turned into a gift. By either me being able to have that gift in return or being able to give that gift to somebody else. It did not mean that I forgot any of the stuff, but it meant that I forgave. And, I had to learn that lesson a lot when I was raising my daughter, who is an adult now. She's autistic. And, and she's autistic. And I had to learn that sometimes when she would have what I would call a meltdown, where her computer was just crashing and she was overwhelmed, that sometimes in the midst of that, she would say things that were just, and I had to learn how to forgive and say, okay, these are going into the pond and I'm not bringing them back up again. And I forgive you. And at the end of it, she would, of course, apologize. And I would just have to kind of get over it and fill my forgiveness bank with her again. And so I had to really learn that example a lot, raising a child with special needs, of course. And so, as Janet G says, you're right about forgiveness being a gift to yourself. My MIL never forgave my FIL for infidelity. In the end of it, it only hurt her as it tore her up until she died. Absolutely. Forgiveness is the best lesson that I've learned from my father. Excellent advice, Sandy Wendy. So the first example I'm going to give to you is my grandmother. Now, my grandmother on my dad's side suffered from mental illness. She was undiagnosed bipolar. Of course, back then it wasn't treated as it is today. And unfortunately, that really became a difficult time. I could easily spill a glass of, you know, um, tea on her table, and we were going to have a time of quite the event over a cup of tea. But when I was 16 years old, my dad was in the kitchen helping my aunt. She was in the living room. She was also diabetic. She was getting hungry. She wanted to go off to bingo. And I said to her, Grandma, just hold on. Dad'll be there in a minute. Well, she just looked at me and told me, why don't you just go to hell? Well, you know what? I looked back at her and my little 16-year-old self, and I said, you coming with me? Inside, I was torn apart. Inside, I was hurting, because how could your own grandmother look at you and say those words? How could she sit there and say that to you? And it was so hard for me to just be able to deal with that and be able to get, kind of process that. And it was a Saturday. We were leaving Sunday to go home. And I remember, that, it was just, she wanted me to drive the next day. And I didn't want to drive her car at all. I wanted to do nothing of the sort. All I wanted to do was go home. And I remember driving home, and I was with my dad, and I had all, it was just, and I was upset. And, I just remember that struggle. And I didn't talk to her for a little bit. My mother came to my side. My dad came to my side. Everybody kind of just came to my side and kind of fussed at her a little bit. Well, you know what? I opened the door for forgiveness. And I opened the door to be able to have that forgiveness to be given from me to her. And by doing that, I really assisted in that, in helping that relationship kind of rebuild itself. Now, I put boundaries up tremendously. I said, Grandma, we're not doing this again. I'm not going through this again. So I put boundaries, but I can tell you the last 2 years of her life, I really did have the best relationship that I ever had with her. We talked, she'd get on the phone. We talked for an hour or so forth. It was really, really just a wonderful, wonderful relationship that we had. And I am so glad that I chose to forgive her. Forgiveness is a choice. And it sometimes can be very mentally healing, and it can sometimes be mentally freeing, especially for the person that is forgiving. And I just remember when she passed away, I was so glad that I had made that choice to forgive. My next example is my dad. Now, my dad being raised in a situation where he had a difficult upbringing. He really did. And he had a father that didn't know how to handle my grandmother and was kind of, nervous with her, and decided to leave. My grandmother remarried for the third time. And guess what? My dad was adopted by the third husband at the age of 6. My grandpa said goodbye. And my dad felt very abandoned. And that really, really, really made it a difficult relationship for us as we, especially my teenage years. It was really, really hard. Well, you know what? I decided to reach out to my biological grandpa. He was my only availability to actually meet a biological grandfather. My mother's grandfather unalived himself. He was an alcoholic, and which is never the answer. And I asked my dad. I said, can we meet, Grandpa? And he said, yes, you can call him, but I want nothing to do with it. He was very hardened. He didn't want to get to know him. He didn't want to take that time. Well, I called and talked to him, and later on he said, do you think I can talk to my son on his birthday? And he did, and they talked for about 2 hours, and they healed their relationship. And I'll never forget, shortly before his passing, he ended up with a stroke. So I knew him the last 3 years of his life a little bit. And he was in a nursing home, and he motioned to have me come closer, and he just said to me, I love you. And you know what was very interesting is his wife at the time said, "Do you know that he doesn't say that very often? Do you know how lucky and special you are to hear those words?" Because I brought his son back to him. Well, that was healing for my dad in a lot of ways. It didn't help necessarily curve and make his anger go away, but it was a very, very healing time for him. And I'm very glad I did that, because if I had waited, any length of time, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to have that reconciliation and healing process happen. Well, you know what? My dad ended up with dementia in 2012, and I had to step in. I was there. Uh, you know, uh, I got angry with my dad in my 20s. I had a failed marriage. I had a daughter, and I had to come back to him. And he welcomed me back in the home, of course, and we healed that relationship. And I forgave my dad. I made it very clear that I said, if I was coming back to live there, because now I'm a single mother and divorced, that, you know what, Dad, we're not going to have the kind of same relationship you and I had. I don't want you to be the disciplinarian. I want you to come in and be a fun grandpa. But if you treat my daughter as you treated me, I'm gone. You won't ever hear from me again. And I made that very clear. I set those boundaries, but I forgave. And my daughter and my dad had a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And again, where it came back to where my dad needed me when he had dementia, he needed me. Was so, so important that I was there for him. And I was there to be able to be a source of strength and help, not only for him, but for my mom during a very, very difficult time in his life. Another example is my uncle. Now, if you go to Surviving Together, you will see that I did a show with her about an incident that happened with my uncle. My uncle was an alcoholic. He had served in Vietnam. He, of course, was there when his father unalived himself, and he struggled with alcohol for many, many years. Well, in that process, there was a time where a couple times he inappropriately, trigger warning, touched me. And I our relationship changed very quickly. I didn't call him uncle anymore. I was very careful of where I was and my surroundings to him. I didn't hug him anymore. It was kind of like hi, bye kind of thing. He was still living with my grandparents. I had to go there and interact with him and interact with, them as well. And when my daughter came around, and my grandmother, at that time, my grandfather passed away. When my daughter came around, um, you know, and he was there, he at that point had stopped drinking, and he was in a sober state. I said to him, "I'm sure you don't remember what you did to me, but if you touch my daughter, you're off to jail. There's no third time around for this whatsoever." And he knew very clearly that I would do it. I set those boundaries. And you know what? I really struggled, I think, out of anybody in my life, that I can't say that's one of the people that I've really struggled to forgive. I chose to forgive him. And I think for me, the ability to totally forgive him was when he was passing from this earth, when he had had a knee replacement, and unfortunately he aspirated into his lungs, and he passed away within 2 weeks. And I went to see him. He wasn't, awake to be able to see anything, hear anything. But I just said to him, "Stephen, I forgive you." And that was very freeing for me, so that when he did pass from this earth, I had a sense of forgiveness to him. I did forgive him at that point. Um, but it took, I was in my teenage years when the whole thing happened with him and I. So just realize, I was maybe 13 years old, and I was in my, late 30s by this point. I really, really struggled with forgiveness with him. And then I had to forgive my ex-husband. That's been on and off a little bit. I had to forgive him at the very beginning. I had to forgive him when he chose that he wanted to walk away from his responsibilities as a husband and a father. I remember getting a call when my daughter was 5 saying that he was remarried. And I just wanted to take my phone and throw it in the pool where we were, because I was so angry. Why is he married and I'm not? And I got remarried, of course, to my best friend in 2007. Some of you know him as Mr. Bluster Crochet. And I am so grateful. And I forgave. I forgave. I love it. I forgave through all that. And I can tell you that that kind of came up again when my daughter was getting married, and she wanted to reconnect with with her biological father, and we did, and so forth. He was invited to when she got married. The only thing was, please don't be in the fatherly role. You're not. And that's to my dad that I have has taken me in and loved me like a dad since Josh and I got married. And he chose not to. And I even offered to say, I'll be willing to even pay for the hotel. I was paying for some of the other hotels, and at the time I could do that. And he chose not to do that. Well, it was very hard for my daughter. So again, here's a wound that kind of got reopened a little bit, and I've since forgiven him. But again, it was like, man, hi, Ben Bacon Bits. I struggled again to forgive, but I did. I think if we realize that there's going to be people in our lives that we don't necessarily give a blank check to, that we put up boundaries, but that are important enough in our lives where we know they're going to hurt us. They're going to do something that's going to be hurtful. None of us are perfect by any stretch of the means. I had a family member in December that has chosen, you know what? Whatever we've done is not worthy to try to work out, so I'm out of here. Well, you know what? That's their choice. I can't do anything about that. And I haven't totally forgiven them yet because there's no closure. I've kind of been putting off writing a letter, and I need to write a letter, and this one I need to send because it's my way of saying goodbye. And I've even asked a close friend, I don't know if this letter is going to be read. Can you do me a favor and just read it so I feel like somebody outside of my little family circle has read it? Can you read it for me? And they said, yep, they know all the sore spots. Can you read it for me just so I feel like somebody's read it? And they said they would be more than willing to do that. But again, if they come back in my life, I will welcome them with open arms. But our relationship will never be the same. There will be boundaries up. Again, because I need to protect myself. And this is now the second time this has kind of happened. This one's worse than the first one. And I'm kind of saying, no, you don't get a third chance. But again, to people like my daughter and my husband and so forth, they get a little bit more of a chance. And I've had to, raising a daughter that struggles with special needs, that sometimes things will come out of her mouth because her minds were moving 10 steps ahead. And, people with autism struggle emotionally. And so they don't know quite how to handle that. They're all over the map. I've had to sit there and go, yep, okay, I'm going to take that and put it in the pond, and it's going to go in the pond, and it's not going to be brought up again. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but I've had to, with her, do it a lot and loving. Forgive but not forget. Keep appropriate boundaries seems like the best way. Absolutely. If we get to the realization, I don't want to forgive that person, I'm giving them carte blanche. No, you're not. When my uncle did what he did, I never forgot what he did. And I struggled for many years to forgive him. Because when I was upset he was an alcoholic, and I would accept what he did. But again, I did have to eventually forgive him. With my dad, oh boy, he had a lot of issues, a lot of anger issues. And my teenage years with my dad were horrible. There were verbal abuses. There was a lot of things that went on. But when I needed my dad, he was there. When I needed my parents, they were there. Even after treating them terribly, because I was angry at them. And they had to turn around and forgive me. And I had to go to them and say, I'm really sorry. I really just acted so terrible to the two of you. And why in one's journey. I had to forgive them, or they had to forgive me, and I had to sit there and forgive them. And that was a healing process, because when I needed someplace to go, I was welcomed with welcome arms. I was there, and I really do not know what I would have done without my parents, being a single mom, dealing with a child that had some special needs. So again, the forgiveness power is not in you, in the person. The forgiveness is totally up to you, of whether you're going to choose to forgive or not. It's totally up to you. And so you have to make the choice of, am I going to forgive? What is this going to look like? And how is this going to be? I'm having a problem with the ring light, and it just may have to stay exactly what it is, but it's, there we go. There we go. Now to stay, please. So again, it has to be your choice. It has to be when you are ready. If you're not ready to forgive, don't forgive. Don't say, oh yeah, I forgive you, and then keep bringing it up again. You need to be able to say, yes, I forgive, and drop it. We had a policy in our family where we dealt with stuff. We forgave each other if we had said something that was hurtful or done something, and it was gone, and we moved on. And it has served us very, very well in the process of it. So the power of forgiveness. I thought this was very interesting, and this is from Harvard Medical School, where it says the REACH method teaches us how to overcome lingering bad feelings for someone who did us wrong. And I think I did put this in the description below. So I really thought that this was interesting to actually have a method. And sometimes there's no method, right? But I thought it was extremely interesting. And so I printed it out. Okay. So the first one, if we're looking at REACH, okay, reaching for a solution. And here's again where I'm going to say, if you're starting to look at this and you're saying to yourself, I can't deal with whatever it is right now, just think in yourself, the trunk method. Okay? The trunk method means pick out the car of your dreams. Whatever dreams has a trunk that would be closed, not Knight Rider that had bought the trunk, and I'm talking about a trunk that's closed, like a Honda Accord trunk kind of thing. So pick a trunk. You can't forgive till you're ready. Absolutely. Pick a trunk of a car that you really like. Okay, whatever car it may be. And if you cannot deal with whatever emotion it is, take the emotions, put it right in the trunk, put them all there, and lock it. Not going to spoil, not going to get ruined. It's going to be just fine. When you can deal with those emotions again, okay, you can take them back out. Unlock the key, okay, and take them back out in front of a therapist, in front of a counselor, in front of a pastor. Now, because I'm rippling off the lifeboat, it all depends what you believe. If you believe in God, I know I do, then you can go the spiritual route when it comes to forgiveness. But because I'm rippling off the lifeboat, we're going to be respectful of that. But for me, that's where I'm going to. I'm going to go to him and say, okay, he's asking me to do this. I've been watching this series, and of course, crocheting, and it was about the Amish. It was very interesting. And he was talking about, about forgiveness coming from a spiritual side of it. And so that was interesting. It was a very interesting thing. And he said, I didn't want to forgive these people that had done all these horrible things. But of course, the God he believes in says we need to forgive. And so it was a very interesting aspect where he said, yes, I have to forgive these people. It's part of it. But I think forgiveness, no matter whether you're coming from a spiritual side of it or not, is a journey. It is a journey, and it has to be when you are ready to do it. However, the method that you need to do to go around doing that. And sometimes, if you can't deal with it, take that trunk, put this emotions in the trunk, and lock it up. You could have a whole fleet of cars if you need to. And I'm telling you, my therapist gave me that recently, and it really has been a tremendous asset, because when I get emotions, they're just no, they're going in the trunk, and they're not going to get open for. I can't deal with it right now. So recall, that's the first part of reach. The first step is to recall the wrongdoing. So this is where maybe writing a list. I thought this was interesting in the series I watched. Writing a list of maybe all the people that you really need to work on forgiving. And you may need to take that list and put it in the trunk and lock it up when you're ready to open it back up again. Maybe you have a card just for that person and you only deal with it when you're ready to deal with it. But writing a list of all the people that maybe you need to work on forgiving. And if that takes all your life, then that's fine. You do it in your timetable. So the first step is recalling the wrongdoing in an objective way. The goal is not to think of the person in a negative light or while in self-pity, but to come to a clear understanding of the wrong that was done. You know, I look at my dad and I think of all the times where there was all this conflict between the two of us and all of this, you know, verbal abuse that went on. And I have to say that as much as that was very hurtful a lot in my life, I had to look at the way he was brought up. He was brought up with a mother suffering from a mental illness. He was brought up with a father that said, I'm out of here. Goodbye, son. After knowing him for 6 years now, where did my dad go? And I'm supposed to call this other person daddy. And then getting up and moving away from his grandparents that were his stable force and going to a new town and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, there's a reason behind it. It doesn't make it right. And then I had to look at my uncle and think, this is a man who had a father for an alcoholic, who had a mother that made everything look pretty and didn't want anything to look bad. And, you know, had a father that ended his, you know, unalived himself with him in the home and, you know, and then went to Vietnam. Well, no wonder he was like he was when he came home. Did he seek help for his alcoholism? No, he didn't. Did he seek any help to deal with the past traumas of his life? No, he didn't. He used the bottle as his way of dealing with it. That is no way to deal with any of your problems. It is only going to hide it, whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, whatever it is, for a short period of time. If you're using drugs or alcohol, please seek professional help if you're trying to get off of it. Reach out to the lifeboat. If you need assistance, please don't try to quit cold turkey. It literally can be life-threatening. She says, I love this. I got so tired of telling people you need to forgive as if it was switch one pulls. Hi, John P. Adventures. Absolutely. It's not. It sometimes goes, you know, in cycles. It wasn't a one quick you're done with my uncle. It took many, many years for me to get to the point where I can say I can truly forgive you. And I wish I could have done it. You know, and I think in another point is you can't be regretful. But to some degree, I was sitting there going, I really wish that I could have done it when he was here. They could hear me say, I forgive you. And I never got that opportunity. So reach is reaching for a solution. E. So we're now at E for the reach solution. Empathizing. Here's where we just talked about empathizing. Empathizing with what my dad went through. Empathizing with what my uncle went through. Empathizing with what my ex-husband grew up with. Empathizing with what my grandmother grew up. She lost her mother at a very young age. So does it make any of these situations right? No, it doesn't. She also dealt with mental illness. No, it doesn't. Not by any stretch of the means. However, we need to have some empathy. It helps us understand the why, the question why. Next, try to understand the person's point of view regarding why he or she may have hurt you. but without minimizing or downplaying the wrong that was done. Like when my grandmother said to me, "Oh, just go to hell." Well, you know what? She was probably crashing as a diabetic. She was irritated. She wanted to go off to bingo. She said it without thinking. Yep, it all makes sense. However, it doesn't necessarily make it right. But I'm so glad that I chose to forgive my grandmother, because I wouldn't have had those last 2 years of her life to really get to know her. And we had a precious, precious relationship those past 2 years. All right, now we're at the A. So we went to REA. Altruistic gift. For those that need it spelled, I'm going to spell it Altruistic. They said there would be no reading on this channel, right? We say no math and no reading. This step is about addressing your own shortcomings, recalling a time when you've been treated harshly and were forgiven. How does it make you feel? Recognizing this helps you realize forgiveness is an altruistic gift that you can give to others. Again, going back to when I hurt, hi, Miss Dragon, going back to when I hurt my parents, I said some pretty awful things when I was going through that time in my life when I was angry. I was angry at the world. I was angry at my dad. I was angry at my mom. And guess what? They when I needed them, they helped me. They brought me to safety. They gave me a place for my daughter and I to live. They gave me a home, to live in, and they helped me with my daughter in the home. I lived with them for 7 years, and I was so, so grateful. So I had to remember, and when I sit there struggling about forgiving, I have to remember, listen, what was that like for my mom and dad to just say, here, it took a while to build back trust and to forgive as I was kind of going through my own little struggles and my own little time, but they did. They were there to help me, get through my divorce, and my dad, when it was time for, him to kind of step in, as people know, my daughter was recently adopted by Mr. Blessed to Crochet, which is my husband now. But at the time, my dad stepped in and took over the father side of the rights and stepped into that place for my ex-husband, and without even a hesitation. And that was such a blessing to us, especially financially, and all the resources that we were able to provide for my daughter. And that's really special to her. And then now in her, late mid-20s, she was finally able to be adopted by my husband now. But what a blessing that was. It was really, truly a blessing. So now we've done REA. Now we're into C, commit. Here's where, until you are ready to forgive, you can't get to this step. I think you could probably get to REA, and then you have to be ready to commit. And if you're not there, guess what? Open that trunk back up, put it back in, and say, I got to R, I got to E, and I got to A. I'm not ready for C, and lock it back up. And sometimes you may need to go, I'm going R, I'm doing E, and I'm doing A, and pull them out every time. And it may take a year in the process, 2 years between each step, however long it does. And there is no shame in going to speak to somebody to get through that, because they may have a very different perspective than you do. So commit. This is the part to, when you are ready to do so, this is where you need to get to. Commit yourself to forgiveness. For instance, write about your forgiveness in a journal or letter that you don't send or tell a friend. This will help you, with being able to forgive that individual. Now, for like this situation that I'm currently in, the letter is going out. Why? Because to me, I may not have an opportunity, or may be given an opportunity, to say goodbyes to this individual. And I feel like I would sit in regret if down the road the phone call comes in and says they're no longer here. I need to be able to say goodbye. And I know that by writing this letter and sending it, there's a huge possibility that this is my goodbye to that person. And again, I've asked a friend to please do me the favor of reading it, just so I feel like if it winds up in the garbage and the person never reads it, it got read by somebody. It cared enough to be read by somebody outside of my family. And this happened in December. This girl's been putting it off. And I finally had to say to somebody, a friend of mine, I need you to make me accountable that in the next 2 weeks, this letter is going to be written and sent off to you. And they're holding me accountable, because otherwise Christmas is going to come and I still not had done it. But this specific one, I am writing and I am sending. But, we've heard Johnny say, write a letter, burn it. Write a letter, tear it up, put it in the shredder. Write a letter, do whatever. If you have a journal and you're like me who have trouble with writing, get an email set up. Type it. Type your journal in. Do it by voice text. You don't have to do it by writing if you cannot do that. So give yourself the ability to find other alternatives that work for you to be able to journal so you can get it from here out. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to send a letter or that you can send a letter. In this case, this letter needs to go out. It needs to. But that's not always the case. It's not always the best circumstance. It's not always the best situation. Sometimes in life, we have people and circumstances that they have done something or we have done something. And you know what? They're out of our lives. We maybe know where they live or where they are. And you know what? It's better to just say, listen, I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to personally tell them how I feel. And it's going to get burned. It's going to get in the shredder. I'm not going to send it because it's going to cause a whole nother little issue that it's going to start. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. You're never going to get, if I send this letter, or I send this email, or I send this text, the outcome that I'm looking for from this situation is not going to be the outcome I'm going to receive. So don't send it. Don't put yourself through that. I think sometimes, well, maybe if I do this, and maybe if I do this, and maybe if I write this. No, don't send it. I know for this circumstance, I need to send. And sometimes I think we do need to send. If we have had somebody that's chosen, and on the outside, I'm going to say, please take a moment to read. And if not, don't send this back. Because I don't want to know it was never written or never read by the person. I don't want to know. But I want to be able to say goodbye. Because that was taken away from me. So, and I will. I'm coming to the point where, yes, I can forgive. And I'm going to put that in there. But I can tell you that person comes back, the relationship's going to be very different. The boundaries are going to be there. And you have 100% right to set your own boundaries. Now we're at the H. Reach. I think this is so awesome. Reach. Hold. Finally, hold on to your forgiveness. This step is because the memories of the event will often reoccur. Forgiveness is not erased. Rather, it is changing your reaction to those memories. Oh boy, isn't that a good one? That's a nugget. Rather, it's changing your reaction to the memories. See, when I think of my grandmother saying those harsh words that day, I don't think anymore about how much that hurt. I look at that as saying, thank you, Lord, for allowing those words to come out of her mouth, because they were such a blessing. That relationship was such a blessing for the next 2 years of my life with her. Those closures for, that closure that happened, and that relationship and that time that we had to spend together, limited as it was. Thank you for allowing those words to come out of her mouth. I look back at that a very different way because I have truly forgiven her for it. And I'm not going to forget it, but I'm going to look at it as a very much of a blessing through that. And, when bad feelings arise, remind yourself that you have forgiven. Ultimately, you want good for the offender. If you need to revisit your commitment by reading your journals or entries or letters or recalling the shared conversation with a friend, you may need to revisit that commitment. You may need to by reading the journals, reading why. Sometimes we forget. Why did we forgive this person? Believe me, I've had that one. Recalling it, talking with a dear friend, and can I encourage it? It's why and again, if I didn't, I will put this article in the in the notes. But we forget the importance of connection. We forget the importance of friendships. The friendships that when people are coming to and trusting you with things that can be so dear to them, do the wonderful thing and just either keep it to yourself between the two of you. Ask if you can share it before you share that information, and keep that confidence. We need those friends in which we can trust. And I think it's really important that we practice small acts of forgiveness on sometimes a daily basis. One way to get more comfortable with forgiveness is to practice small acts in everyday life. Somebody cuts you off. We all have that, don't we? Those that drive. I don't drive much anymore. They cut you off, right? Boy, what is the first thing a lot of people do? If not everybody, they'll either scream or yell or fuss. Some of them will put up that finger. When somebody cuts you off, and you get annoyed when you have a parking place picked up and somebody swoops in and parks in the parking place, or somebody cuts in line, or somebody is just rude when you're dealing with somebody who's a cashier in customer service and they're just rude. We all come along things that we can say, hey, this is an opportunity to practice forgiveness. Okay, they really annoyed me today, but maybe they're really having a hard day. I remember when I was working at a auto mall, and we had lost one of our team members that was driving home, had a half of a, not a full covering of their helmet on, and actually fell off his motorcycle and eventually passed away. And I just remember at the, finding out, my boss went by and I said, how is he doing? And he just looked at me and goes, and I knew then. And, this couple came up and they were waiting for their car, and everything was a little bit delayed. Well, thank you for stopping in, love it. They were annoyed because their car was taking longer. At this point, he had gone back and told the staff back there, and he was, a team, manager back there. And so they all were upset over this loss. And I just remember that this couple was annoyed that their car was taking longer than it normally would for an oil change. And they just came to me and I said, you know what, I'm really sorry this is taking a little bit longer than you expected. We just lost a team member, and our bosses had to go back and tell them. And I said, I just really appreciate your patience. And the gentleman looked at me and said, well, that's not my problem. I want my car done now. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. This man had 8 kids. This man, we knew he was a team member. I had just spent a few minutes crying before the gentleman came up. And I thought, how unkind and how unloving can you be to know that a team of people just got the news that he's no longer. These were brothers back there to some degree. They were friends. They'd worked with this gentleman for several years and come close to him, and they just found out that he was no longer here. And I just thought, is there any kind of compassion in your heart whatsoever? And I had to turn around and forgive them because I don't know what's going on in their life. Maybe they've lost a son. Maybe they've lost a child. Maybe this hits too close to home. I don't know. But their response was certainly not something, thank you, Digago, something that, I really certainly was expecting out of their mouth. This way you also can learn to immediately stop negative reactions and the feelings that come with it when you do that. Use that moment to recognize the wrong and realize it wasn't directly at you personally, and forgive him and her on the spot. The guy was frustrated because thank you, LJ. The guy was he was frustrated because his car was taking longer than expected and longer than normal. But it wasn't directed at me. He was irritated. And boy, I tell you, customer service, you had to learn that real quick. They may be yelling at you, Define, welcome. They may be yelling at you, but guess what? It wasn't directed at you. I remember calling Pizza Hut recently because they were a little bit delayed, to say the least, and I won't go into all that detail. But I remember calling the lady up, and she said, I was telling her all about what was going on and everything and all the delay. And she said to me, she goes, "You're the first person in the past 4 phone calls that hasn't called and yelled and screamed at me on the phone." I said, "What's that going to do? Not going to do anything. That's only going to make the situation worse." I said, "Here's the circumstance. Here's the situation. I've been on the other side of that. Let's talk about it. Let's see if we can come to some way you can help me and I'll help you. What is the sense of sitting there yelling at somebody?" She said she was crying with me over the phone because they had something happen and it was out of her control. 4 phone calls and everybody was yelling at her. People, we have to treat people as we want to be treated. It doesn't always mean that we're going to be treated beautifully. Wow, I think you're right. It sounds much deeper, like he was comfortable with that level of pain. Yep, I don't know why, but hi, Tommy Bird. Forgiveness is more for yourself, so much less for the other party. Hard to understand until you understand it. Yes. And that's why I thought it was so important to give examples in my life where I have forgiven people. I'm so glad I forgave my grandmother. I'm so glad I forgave my dad. I'm so glad I've kind of had times where I've had to forgive my ex-husband, and I have forgiven. And, and I know that may be an ongoing situation where down the road I may have to forgive again. My daughter was a huge one. And I've even said to my daughter, I love you, but I'm not out of this world yet. I'm not perfect. And there's going to be times where I'm going to say or do something that's hurtful to you. And let me just go ahead and say I'm sorry right now. But let's work it out. This other situation that has come on in my life, I don't know if there's a conclusion for it. But just because there's not a conclusion on the one side doesn't mean that I can't in some way make sure that I have closure for myself. I will say this. The situation that involves the individual is a person that taught me how to do this. They taught me how to crochet. They gave me the passion for crochet. And there were times when I thought, I didn't want to look at this. I didn't want to touch it. I don't even want to do it. But you know what? It is too much of something that I'm good at that helps me through my fibromyalgia day and my fibromyalgia pain that I'm not willing to give up because somebody did something wrong to me that I loved and I cared about, and I still love and care about. So just because this was part of that, I have had to separate it and say, I have made this. They may have given me the passion for this. and the love for it. And I have continued to expand my knowledge and my skill for it. But I've had to separate this from the person and sit there and say, thank you for giving me the want to do this. And I'm the one who persisted. I'm the one that kept teaching myself. I'm the one that kept doing it. I'm the one that kept learning it. So I've had to separate that between the two. Well, yes, sometimes it is taking the high road. It is. Do I understand it? No, I don't. But I'm going to tell you all one very important thing. When that whole situation happened in December, and it's something that I don't feel, there may be a time way down the road where I may talk about exactly what the situation is and was, but I don't ever feel like that's an option until they're no longer here. And then I think at that point I could probably talk about it. But I can tell you one important thing. When that whole situation happened, the lifeboat became real because I had connection points that were coming out and helping me getting through that time and through that difficulty. And now it's kind of like 6 months later, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And I've been saying I'm going to write a letter for the past 3 months. And I finally had to say to somebody, listen, I really need you to make me accountable. I've got to get this letter done. It is sitting on my mind, and I know I don't want to sit at the computer doing this letter. Can you please help me to do it? And that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do it. And I'm making else make me accountable to make sure that the letter is written. And then I feel like, I almost kind of didn't want to send it because I'm like, oh, the person probably is not going to read it. But at least I feel like if I give it to somebody else outside of my family, they're going to read it. And then I'll feel like it got read. Exactly. You can bring something good out of anything. Sometimes something great can come from relationships with someone you may have created something bad in your life. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there are circumstances. And again, I think it's up to individual. I feel like a lot of the circumstances that may come through in my life are certainly forgivable. There's some things that I know without even speaking them. I don't know how I'd get to the other side of forgiveness on. I don't know how. And I hope to goodness gracious I never have to look at that, figuring out how to do that one. That would be lovely, right, if I didn't have to do that. But I really, really encourage you to start looking at that. And I think having that really simple reach method was really, really nice, really, really helpful. Yeah, I get that, Tommy Bird, about writing it for myself, and I get that, and I thought about that. I write it myself, but the circumstance to me makes me feel like, yes, if I write it myself and I don't send it, then I don't get to say goodbye. And I know that if I don't be able to say goodbye, I'm going to regret not saying it. Whether the person comes back or not, that's their choice. Will the relationship be different? Absolutely dang on tootin' it will. They're not going to get a third chance with me. I'm going to be very guarded. I'm Maritza, very guarded, and that's okay. But I think having tools, crochet is in my toolbox. Conversation or connection is in my toolbox. This is something else. Having the trunk is another thing in my toolbox. Not allowing things to ruminate in our heads. Those are the negative thoughts. And having something called the reach method. I love it because it's giving you, saying goodbye is important. It's giving you little steps to be able to have bullet points. And again, maybe you can only say, I can only do R today. We're going to put it in the trunk. I'm not touching that for another 3 months. Then work on E. It may take you a year to work on E. Well, then I could, A. Well, then going to do A. Fine. Take as long as you need. But I think having some kind of a method like that broken down is very helpful, especially if you journal, because you can put that in your book, REACH, reach. The goal is to reach towards forgiveness. The goal is to be able to say, I forgive that person. It does not mean that you forget. I think sometimes people think, if I forgive that person, then I've forgotten it. No. If I've forgotten it, then I couldn't be here telling you about what my grandmother said. I still remember it. I remember exactly where I was standing. I remember exactly where she was standing. I remember exactly what her face looked like when she said it. I exactly remember where my dad and my aunt were. I remember the layout of the house. I remember everything. However, when I think of that, I think, thank you that she said that, because out of that came blessings. And if she hadn't have said that, would I have gotten as close as I did with her the last 2 years? If my dad had said to me, well, yeah, no, I don't want you to contact your grandfather, I would have had to respect what my dad's wishes were. I'm really glad he said to me, well, you can call him, that's fine, but I want to talk to him. Because by calling my grandfather and talking to my grandpa, he was able to eventually talk to his son. And there was healing there. And I had to forgive my grandfather for walking away from my dad, because that was a ripple effect on my dad for many, many, many years. That a ripple effect on me. But I will tell you one thing. When he motioned to me, my grandpa came like this. And I got close to him because he was having trouble talking. And said, I love you. There is no gift that my grandpa could have given me other than those words out of his mouth. And when his wife said to me, guess what? He doesn't do that very often. Do you know how special you were to hear those words out of his mouth? He often didn't even do it to his own children or his grandchildren. He was not an emotional man by any stretch of the means. But see, I brought his son that I know he loved in his own way back to him to have a relationship. He used to call, my dad used to call, we were in Florida, he was in Maryland. My dad used to call up on the phone to the nursing home, and he would walk, as quickly as he could after having a stroke. He said, tell Chuck I'm on my way. Tell my boy I'm on my way. And my dad would be hearing this and such powerful healing in it. And I'm so glad that that happened for my dad. And it was ironic because I remember when my grandfather passed away, I remember waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning with just feeling like something wasn't right. And my dad told me later that evening that he had passed away. And I said, Dad, what time did he pass away? And he said 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was like what I woke up out of a dead sleep. And I just thought, I know something's not right. But to hear those words out of my grandpa's mouth, I love you. He couldn't have given me any money or gift in the world that meant more than those words. They were a priceless gift I will never forget for the rest of my life. But if I hadn't chosen to forgive him, my dad hadn't chosen to forgive him, if we hadn't made the journey up there several times, because by this point we had made a visit with him when he was sitting at a table before he winded up in a nursing home. And I remember looking, thinking, these two gentlemen haven't seen each other in 40 years. And they're sitting on the table and they're talking and this talking. And my grandpa would go, well, that's a piece of cake. And my dad would say exactly the same thing. And I thought, they haven't been in the same room, but they acted so much alike. It was truly amazing to see. So I really, really encourage you all to look at forgiveness from a very, very different perspective. And I hope this was helpful, to make you realize that the power of forgiveness is not to the person you're forgiving, but it's giving you freedom. It's kind of why I chose the eagle. He's a strong bird. He's America's symbol of freedom. That eagle, and he's flying. And sometimes when we choose to say, you know what, I'm going to work on forgiving this one person. I don't think that we need to sit there and say, okay, we got 10 people to forgive. Let's start 10 at a time. You may need to do one person at a time. But that eagle is flying. And I think that it's something that we can work on. And I think, too, it's something that we need to realize sometimes we need to work on with a therapist, with a pastor. And sometimes we can also bring in a friend that can assist us to go through that. And through those difficult times and through those moments, it's not an easy thing. And it's not under anybody else's timetable but yours. Don't sit there and say, oh, well, this person went through this situation that was worse than mine, but they forgave this person sooner than that. Doesn't matter. You have your own timetable on how long it's going to take you to forgive somebody. And if you're not there yet, don't worry about it. It's not anybody's problem, but it's your own thing. Don't, and this goes to the saying that, about what everybody else does. I hate to say keeping up with the Joneses, but I mean, keeping up with the Kardashians. Can we get a new thing and not play everything on the Joneses? But, it's like, just because they do this doesn't mean you need to follow in the same timeline. I had a fallout with my brother. It took me a few years to say, I'm sorry and I forgive you. He did the same. Not long after that, he was diagnosed with cancer. He was the eldest of 11. We lost him at 95. Wow, that's amazing, though, that he was at 95. For those that are, from a religious standpoint, really good for anything, anybody that wants to. The movie, The Blind with Phil Robertson, was an excellent movie done as showing the power of forgiveness and really showing the change he made in his life. If anybody's interested in watching that, Elvis Presley said something. He said, you know what? The image is one thing. And I'm not going to quote this verbatim either. The image is one thing. The man is another. It's very hard to live up to an image. Isn't that the truth? Elvis himself, you looked up at him and he had the jumpsuits and this and the house and all that. But who was he as a man? Did we take the time to learn who Elvis was outside of the jumpsuits and the fame and all of the other kind of stuff? Who is he himself? Just because everybody does it this way doesn't mean you need to. If it takes you 4 or 5 years to forgive somebody, do it in your timetable. And don't sit there and say, well, it's not under my time. They did it sooner. But it doesn't matter. Do it yourself. Do it the way you need to do it. Do it the process that you may be. This may not be the process that you need to do it. Maybe you'll not do it necessarily in order. Fine. But have some way of looking at those. Looking at the ability to say, yes, this is something that I need to do. And I would really maybe suggest picking an easy one. Maybe the ones that are really easy. And just maybe going through this reach method and saying, okay, I'm going to start off with this person first. This one's not so much of a challenge. And find out at the end of that, do you feel just a little bit lighter? Isn't the goal is to just lighten your load a little bit? Isn't the goal by forgiveness? There were several thumbnails I could have used, and one was I thought about using was a present in a field of flowers. Hi, Kristen, in a field of flowers, all wrapped up so beautifully. And that is waiting for you when you are ready to forgive. And when you open that gift, you're opening the gift of freedom. It's a gift for you. It's not a gift for the person. And oftentimes, I think too, when we give that gift of forgiveness, and then we sit there and go, okay, I'm going to forgive that person. And we're expecting a response that we don't get back. Yep. We need to walk away from that going, at least I know I forgave them. You don't have to like their response. But you can sit there and going, okay, well, I have given them I've forgiven them, and then I have received the gift. And all I can do is wish them all the best. You know, if we don't forgive that person, what happens inside of our heart and soul is bitterness and anger. And that does not make for a happy life. And we have to realize that that is part of the gift of forgiveness, allowing those emotions to not live in our heart and soul. So I hope this was helpful. I really thought that Mental Health Month deserved a topic on forgiveness. It's a tough topic. It's not always a fun topic. And everybody has their own opinion. But I wanted to make sure that I could give some kind of tool for you all to have to be able to sit there and go, this is something that I can use. Do it in your own timetable. You don't have to announce it to the person you're doing it to if you know the response is not going to be anything but positive. You may not have the opportunity to do it. The person may no longer be here anymore, and you'll have to do it maybe in a letter. Maybe if you go screaming out in the country someplace, go screaming into a pillow, say, I forgive you. It doesn't mean you have to forget. It doesn't mean you still have stuff that you need to process through. But it is a sense of taking something and letting it go. We're not getting into Frozen. Right? Let it go, let it go. And it's such a corny saying, and I really struggle with that because letting it go seems so easy. It's not a trigger or a handle that can just be pulled down. I think it takes time. Make sure it's in your own timetable. Stay connected. Connect with those friends. Help them to make you accountable. Have some place that you can go talk to. It's really, really important, y'all. It's why we do what we're doing on the boat. It's why the ripples are here. So you have a place to talk to. And you have a place to come when you need to sit there and say, I need somebody to talk to. There's always somebody. Through here, through my Lighthouse Beacons group, through the Discord for the Lifeboat, the Facebook group for the Lifeboat, reaching out is not hard. And reaching out for help is not hard either. It's something that you can be a blessing to somebody if you allow yourself to ask those words for help. No shame in it. And there's no shame in however long it takes you to forgive somebody. And maybe that's something you can't do for whatever reason for that person, and that's okay too. Don't feel guilty. Don't try to live up to the Kardashians. I can't say the Joneses because I'm one of them. But don't sit here and say I have to be like I need to live up to the Kardashians, right? You be yourself. You're amazing. And we all love you, and we're grateful you're here both on my channel as well as the Lifeboat. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for joining me. Those that were able to join me today, I appreciate it. Those that are watching on the replay, please go over to the Lifeboat and subscribe to them. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, Blessed to Crochet, please subscribe. I don't teach you how to crochet. I just do this kind of thing where we just connect and we have fun and we talk and everything. And for those interested, I do have a birthday giveaway. My birthday is next month and we're going to celebrate. So I have a birthday giveaway. Go check out that video on my channel. And I thank everybody. I thank the Lifeboat so much. I'm so blessed to be a Ripple. And stay connected, everybody. It does truly make a huge difference. And in a little bit, Need a Meeting will be on. So hopefully you will come and have another place of connection. We've got Spanx coming on later as well, followed up by our own Admiral Tommy. So we got a full day, don't we? Have a blessed day, you all. Stay connected. Love you all. And bye-bye.